This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library.
Enough, you can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price that you can get Truefire All Access for.
Okay, the number one problem that I've encountered really in the world of digital modelling in general is kind of become a thing that is, I think, a talking point for a lot of guitarists in general, whether you're using digital modelling or not, or whether you're just attending a gig and you're noticing things. So this is one of the things that I've definitely noticed is that, you know, some of my favourite guitarists might be using digital modelling gear, but when I see like social media clips or like clips of them backstage or, you know, sound check or whatever, there's a distinct difference between hearing one of those guys play and hearing, say, Joe Bonamassa play or Robben Ford play. And I think it does make a huge difference, not only in the perception of the tone, but in also like how good that guitarist sounds. You know, all of these things just make a huge difference to my ears. So kind of my starting point here is that in live music, I think the guitarist needs to, in general, be within the mix and not too loud for most gigs. That's, I think, a fair point to say, first of all. So, like, for most people, that's not going to be appropriate to be showing up to a gig with a 100-watt Marshall. However, at any point during a gig where a guitarist is expected to take a solo or a lead part, I think, and this is kind of where I've arrived, that guitar should be at the level in the mix that the vocal was preceding it. Otherwise, you get this thing happening where it just feels like the energy is falling out, or the guitar tone just doesn't really sound right, or the dynamics are not there. All of these things that I think we're super used to kind of hearing in 2025, you know, since a lot of, you know, live music tends to have some amount of digital gear. Now, I've got an idea for something which might fix this, which is something that I first tried a couple of weekends ago when I was playing with my buddy Lewis Corbett. And so the problem that I've been knocking up against is, so most sound guys or gigs that I'm on, the sound guy will not really be actively mixing, particularly, and not as active as like on a really pro gig, where, you know, imagine like you're gigging with Jamiroquai, you've had like weeks of rehearsal, you're Rob Harris, all right, Rob, and, you know, throughout the set, the sound guy knows particularly when you've got a solo happening. So probably, I'm going to guess in that situation, what might happen is that Rob's levels stay relatively consistent coming out of his quad cortex, but at the mixing desk, you bump it up like 2, 3, 4 dB, so that at front of house, that guitar is now at the level that the vocal was before, so that the audience gets like the actual full sound of what should be happening during a guitar solo. I'm going to guess that's what happens. The trouble is on like semi-pro gigs or gigs like I do, like function gigs, what happens is the sound guy is maybe, or maybe even a festival gig or something like that, the sound guy is maybe not going to be as familiar with the set and may have a bunch of other things going on as well. So say like you've got to fix the microphones. What happens if that's happening during a set, or, you know, your bass player is saying there's something wrong with their in-ear mix? You know, a sound guy can only do one thing at a time. On a pro gig, you probably have a monitor guy as well as like a front of house guy. You have like 2 people dealing with these things, at least. If not more, you have some techs as well. But on a normal gig, so there's this idea about like active mixing. I guess, to be honest, it's more kind of semi-active. Like if the sound guy is able to fully attend to what's happening on stage and listening at that point in time, and he notices that there's a guitar solo happening, he might give that a little bit of a boost up. But the trouble with this is that probably in that case as well, that sound guy is also going to have set it up so that he's mixing based on what your loudest level is. So the trouble is that if your guitar boost that you have for your lead tone goes too high, everything else will be relatively too low. And if you don't show your sound guy your boost, I've tried this a few times, you might find that once, because he's mixed with the level that you're like playing a rhythm and a clean, and you don't show him that actually when you go to do a lead tone, you're going to go maybe 4 or 5 dB higher than that, because that's the level that it probably needs to be heard properly. That will then push you into clipping, and you kind of end up in this situation where you're in like a bit of a no man's land, not really knowing what to do. If you just do a 2 dB boost on your solo tones and like the guitar is in general mixed a little bit lower, you might not get heard at all, or things might sound a little bit wimpy, a bit weedy. I think I've got a solution, and this is it. So let me know if this is stupid or not. So you've got an FRFR, some of you guys. Some of you might be gigging with this, or you might have a real amp on stage as well. Here's the idea for me now. Accepting that probably in 2025, a lot of us are probably using digital gear. I'm going to guess as well, if you're watching this video, that most of you are not necessarily like me. We're not on like gigs of consequence, right? We're on like wedding gigs, the gigs that pay, pub gigs, you know, just normal stuff, right? And in which case as well, if you're on a wedding gig, I'm going to guess that most of what the punters hear of your guitar tone is probably from front of house, because stage volumes are not what they used to be, right? Here's an idea, because typically if you have your solo boost like 4, 5, 6 dB, the other trouble that I have in my in-ears is that it actually then pushes it to a point where it's actually uncomfortable for me, because it's now like significantly louder relative to the other instruments in the mix in my ears, which actually doesn't really sound much like front of house, because I've got the guitars higher in my mix than they would be at front of house probably. So instead of having a big boost that goes through front of house, what if you do a big boost through your FRFR speaker instead, or your guitar amp on stage, so that for your solo you get a bit more of a full sound, a bit more of that filling the room sound, just for that point when you're soloing. And otherwise it's gonna be more polite, and you're gonna go back into the mix as intended and as most people are comfortable with. But just for your solo, you're going to have your FRFR speaker actually giving quite a lift. This is kind of what I thought this actually could work. It's just crazy enough that it might work. So through your front of house, maybe your lead tone might go up 1, 2 dB maybe. But if you have a separate output on your modeler, so when I'm using Fractal FM9 or Line 6 Helix or HX Stomp, I kind of send the output separately to here. So what I can do on that output, on scenes or snapshots where I've got my lead tone, I can actually boost that significantly into the front of my FRFR speaker, and instead of it being a thing where the FRFR speaker is always loud on stage, and that is definitely not a thing which I would want either, because it's like I don't want to be too loud for folks on stage, and I don't want it to be that the sound guy is going to be complaining about what I'm doing. I just want it to be a factor that if it does get to the point where I'm taking a solo, that folks can hear it, or that it doesn't sound super weedy and wimpy. So that is my idea. So go to your FM9 and on the, or Helix or whatever you're using, and just try this. If you're anything like me, I'm sure you will have run into these circumstances, right? And definitely that's the number one thing that I'm thinking about, is that I don't want to sort of wreck the experience for the rest of the band, and I'm putting these boosts on that are going into people's ears as well, and I'm kind of looking around like, is this too loud for other people's ears, and what's happening? Instead, if they're all on in-ears anyway, they're probably not going to notice the boost on stage. The sound guy may, but he probably is not going to mind, because by the time the solo stopped, you're going to then come back down in volume, and he's not going to care. You could explain to them what's going on as well, if you're brave. But that's kind of what I thought, my idea. This is the same kind of situation. I've been gigging with Lewis, who uses a Helix, and this as well. And when we're both going direct to front of house, it's kind of like, how much lift do you need above the other guitarist to get heard? I think this totally could be the solution to that as well, because we've done this a few times where it's like, right, we need to bring the cleans and rhythms down relative to the lead, so that, you know, when you're taking a solo or when I'm taking a solo, that lifts above the average kind of level of the band. That's just another way that this can help that happen. And it's not going to hit a compressor going into the front of house. It's also not necessarily going to cloud up the front of house mix too much. It's, I think, a little bit of a cleverish, kind of lateral thinking way to solve this problem. Because what we want for most of the gig is to blend in with the mix. And what is happening a lot of the time with solos is that we're blending in too much. And anything we do other than this to try and combat that will either involve the sound guy having to turn us up, or things getting too loud in other people's ears. This might be a solution that could totally work. So all this would be doing is kind of giving us some more front of house sort of support. It'd be supporting your lead tone during your solo, and then once you get back to the cleans and rhythms, it just stops, backs off a bit. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I've been trying that. I've used it on at least that one gig. I'm going to experiment with this some more when I get a chance to, because I think there is something to this idea. I don't want to be a loud guitarist all the time. I just want to be at the right level for the gig. And I think I have a little bit of a dispute about what that level might be when it comes time to solo. But when it does come time to solo, I don't want the rest of the band's ears mixes to be interfered with. I don't want them to go, whoa, that guitar's suddenly really loud, which is kind of what happens if you have like an appropriate level of boost to get heard above stuff. This could be the solution. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Am I way off? I could be way off, but I thought this is a slightly different idea to anything that I've tried before. I'm not sure that I've heard anyone talk about it either, but it could be the way forward. Myself and Lewis actually found that this kind of did work quite well in the gig, and I think we're going to experiment with it a bit more.